So what do you do when you're overwhelmed with bills, more debt than you can handle, no way out? The law provides for some alternatives, bankruptcy being one of them. I'm really excited to have today an attorney who specializes in this area to share with us what that means, Karine Karadjian. Karine, thank you for taking time today.
Thank you for having me.
Give me a little background. How'd you get into law, and then how'd you get into bankruptcy practice in particular?
So I got into law, I think ever since high school, I've really been wanting to go to law school. And so that was on my radar for quite some time. And then in law school, bankruptcy was definitely not on my radar. We didn't even, I think we had like one elective bankruptcy class in all of law school. But my second year of law school, I got the opportunity to extern for a bankruptcy judge in Woodland Hills. And I loved her, she loved me, I loved the law. It just went with my personality. It's a lot of kumbaya and fresh starts and all of that. So she recommended me to the judge next door, who recommended me to another job, and that it kind of just went from there.
So it's interesting the way you describe it. Of all things, I'm in business, and so
Yeah.
when I've worked with bankruptcy attorneys in the past, I've mostly worked with those that are on the creditor side. And to me, of all the attorney world, they seem like the biggest barracudas from a business point of view. And then on the debtor side or on the petitioner side is more about helping people get fresh starts. So where do you practice of that equation, just on one side or the other, and why?
Yeah, I only represent debtors. So I know a lot of my colleagues represent both. And so I refer out to very trusted colleagues when it's a creditor issue. It's just for me personally, I would feel like I would have an internal struggle there with some sort of conflict if I'm representing both. So I opt to represent debtors. I've seen the struggles they go through. We've gone through struggles like that as an immigrant family. Back in the day, my folks had to file for bankruptcy. So I feel the pain, I know the pain, and I want to help people overcome this difficult chapter of their lives.
Part of the opportunity to even discuss it is to overcome the stigma. I have a friend of mine, a good friend, who's a good person. He grew up in a rough background, worked hard, got ahead, had insurance, health insurance lapse, unfortunately in an accident, major hospital bills, more money than he would make in 5 years. And I was sitting down with him trying to get some advice, and I suggested his only alternative was bankruptcy. And he was so ashamed. I said, let me rephrase that. You should file for bankruptcy protection. You are bankrupt. That's the reality, right? Financially, you're upside down on your assets are less than your liabilities. Your income is less than your expenses. The law provides for protection for you because it's not shameful. It's a process we go through. How do you explain to customers or prospective clients that it's not about shame? This is the law. It's a legal process. It's not cheating the law. In fact, the opposite. It's a process of law.
I think you summarized it pretty well. That's exactly how I explain it to them. And I try to do a lot of content and put it out, online. And I do a lot of informational videos, and a lot of it focuses exactly on that. Like, let's get rid of the stigma. Let's understand that your credit score is only one part of this equation, that you only need credit so you can get more credit, right? And oftentimes if you're drowning in debt, and there are laws that are designed to protect you and give you a fresh start, there's nothing wrong with taking that. And, people's lives can change in a matter of a few months, in a matter of an instant. When someone gets sick, when there's an accident, there's a myriad of reasons why people file for bankruptcy. And I think we have to stop thinking that it's only like someone's irresponsible spending or something like that. And even if it was, they still deserve a fresh start. So it's just about educating the clients, letting them know that it's not the end of the world, that there's relief from them, that they should take that opportunity, and then they can have a much brighter future with their families.
One of the things I tell them, they're concerned that somehow they're cheating the creditors, right? Like in the case of my friend, he has a medical bill with a hospital for $450,000. He has a lease for a truck that he really couldn't afford. It's a ridiculous amount of money and other credit. He's been trying to keep everything going, so he's borrowing money, getting further behind. And I tell him, look, all these lenders, they know that bankruptcy is a possible risk. They all bake into their costs because people go bankrupt, there's a loss built into their interest rates. That's why they charge the rates they do. Tell me a little bit about how ordinary it is for some of these creditors to write off bankruptcies and why that is baked into the expensive things we pay for.
I think definitely the interest rates are designed in such a way that these creditors are making so much money. And I always tell my clients, don't feel sorry for them. All the interest you've paid them throughout the years more than makes up for what you're going to be discharging. A, and B, they're likely going to get all the write-off benefits on their end when it comes to taxes and things like that, and writing off a loss, charging off an account. And also, in recent years, I've seen that a lot of these credit card companies, they implement a ridiculously high interest rate on top of like the regular interest rate.
Right.
It will jump up if you miss a payment, right?
Right.
So, and a lot of these folks, they're missing the payments, but then they're trying to catch up. So they're still paying a ton in fees and interest. And so it's not something where I feel like you should feel sorry for the creditor. Of course, you never want to purposely scheme something and go on a shopping spree and file for bankruptcy. But if life happened to you, you've made your best efforts to repay, and now you're just at a point where you cannot, especially with 30% interest rates, it's time to consider options like bankruptcy or sometimes debt settlement if bankruptcy is not a good option.
I tell them all the time, Bank of America and Wells Fargo is not shedding a tear for your financial trauma.
Right.
If they can get an extra $10 a month out of you, they're going to charge you an extra $10 a month. They don't care. It's just numbers to them. And so you need to treat it as a business. So how much of your job then is, or your business is, the practice of law, and how much of it is really the soft skills of counseling people, encouraging people, motivating people, getting them ready for their examinations and such? How much of the business is beyond just filing forms and pleading to judges?
Well, definitely more than 50% of my business is kind of being like your financial psychologist, right? There are a lot of tears involved. There's a lot of guilt, regret. There's a ton of it. You hear so many life stories, and a lot of the times it's really humbling. And so a lot of my work just goes into counseling my clients, letting them know this is okay, letting them know they're going to feel so much better after this, and prepping them for the hearing, which they're of course very, very nervous for. And it's a relatively easy hearing, but they don't believe you until they're done with it. And I always joke with my clients that I want to take before and after photos before the hearing and after the hearing, because you can just see the relief on their faces when they're done with that hearing and they know that it's going to be okay,
Right. I mean, if you were scamming people and you're worried about the judge catching you scamming them, you should be up at night worried about that, because that's what everybody's trying to do that. But if you're just a person that got caught over your head, the process is designed to verify that. And I think that you want to be honest and transparent and move forward as well. But so I know that part of the challenge of your business is you can logically paint a process that's best for your client, yet there's the emotional part that holds them back. So what do you do? What can you do? Are there resources? Are there books? Are there videos? Are there movies? What is it you do to help people say, listen, this is about getting on with your life? I mean, I appreciate you're in a difficult situation, but we can get out of it. How do you encourage people? What tools do you rely on to help you get customers to move forward?
I think a lot of times just the conversation that we have is sufficient for a lot of them, because I don't have a very volume heavy practice, so I am able to spend a lot of time talking my clients through it. Another thing that I found helpful has been to get them resources from, let's say, Shiva. You've spoken to Shiva. He's an amazing credit repair attorney, a very ethical one who's quite honest about the whole process. And so sometimes I have them speak with him if it's something they're really worried about, like what's going to happen down the line and if they're ever going to be able to buy a house and a car. So talking to a few different professionals definitely helps them. And then just educating them on, if you're not going to be paying the credit card bills, how much better is your budget going to be looking down the line? And eventually you will be able to build up a savings again,
Right.
and be able to do fun activities with your kids and just resume a regular life. And
Right.
I think once they understand that, it helps them.
One of the root causes of all this, I think, is a lack of basic fundamental education on personal finances. It surprises me how few people grow up and understand that you either make more money than you spend, or you're going to have a problem at some point in your life, and you have to have a plan for that. And most people just don't really think that through. What do you think? Is there any particular suggestion or area or program? Like, for example, me, I regularly encourage people to read the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And then he created a game. Actually, the book was created to explain the game called the cash flow game, where you go through the process. And I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's a tool to help people understand basic fundamental finances. Is that what you see as well? I mean, is it that people their character is irresponsible, or they just don't know and get caught up over their head?
I think it's a mix. Sometimes there is a responsibility in there, but for a lot of people, it is that they just get caught up and they just don't keep track. So you'd be surprised how many people, because we have to go over the budget when we're filing the bankruptcy schedules, and we have to go line item by line item for their expenses. And it's surprising to me how many people don't know how much a month they're spending
I know, yeah.
on groceries, how much they're spending on childcare, and all of these little things that add up, like Netflix and Hulu and blah, blah, blah. And so I think it's really important to teach people to keep track of their budget for at least a few months, so you can start to get an idea of how much you're spending where, and where you can cut things and where you can't.
I used to be a loan officer doing mortgage loans. And I remember I went once to a house and I remember looking at, it was a nice neighborhood, but this one house had like the worst grass. They had junk on the front yard. I knew they had young kids. They had toys strewn all over the place. I walked in the house. It didn't feel kept. You could feel the stress. And so as a loan officer, you would ask, well, how much do you have in debt to qualify them? And I remember the husband and wife had never discussed this with each other. So he had his credit cards, and this goes back years, but he had about $50,000, $60,000. And then she had her credit cards that he didn't know about for another 50, 60. They had over $100,000 of debt that they didn't never put together. Neither had added up their number, and neither had put together with their spouse. And it was like, well, just the payments were more than on the credit cards. I mean, payments were more than the house payment they're looking at. So it was amazing to me. I remember when I went home to my wife that day and just said, honey, from now on, I'm keeping everything in Quicken. I'm going to report every month. I'm going to send you a copy of it. Keep whatever we owe, if anything. And we don't owe any credit cards. We've always paid everything off in full. It really motivated me to kind of keep track. But I think you're right. Most people don't even keep a scorecard on a regular basis on their personal finances.
And I think you brought up a great point about the spouses. I have so many clients where they're unaware of what their spouse makes, what their spouse spends, and the debt that their spouse has.
Secret life of the spouse. Yeah, it can be very scary. So, and I don't mean to be crass and talk about the numbers, but at some point, one of the questions people must say is, gee, I'm bankrupt. I don't have any money. How much does it cost to get out of this? There's legal fees, there's filing fees and such. What's it cost to get out of the process, and where's that money come from?
So if we're talking about Chapter 13s, which is the reorganization for 3 to 5 years, that cost is set by the court. So it's going to be standard with any attorney you call in the Central District of California. If it's a W-2 wage earner, it's $5,000. If it's a self-employed individual, it's $6,000 plus the court filing fee of $313. And a lot of attorneys will take about half of that up front and then bill the other half to be paid through the Chapter 13 payments. But the typical bankruptcy that I think most people think of is Chapter 7, liquidation. You're done in 3-4 months. You don't pay anything back to your creditors. And the fee for that, I think, greatly varies within LA. Like the West Side, people charge more. The Valley, people charge a little less. I would say for the very simple kind of cases where it's low income, no assets of significant, like no real estate, stuff like that, probably you're looking at about $1,400 and up. For more complex Chapter 7s, maybe $1,800 to $2,000. And in rare circumstances, it's going to go something above that. The court filing fee is $338.
Is the filer allowed to charge that on a credit card? Because at some point,
I wish that wouldn't that be easy.
because by definition, you know you're not going to pay that back, so you can't charge it on a credit card. So it has to come out of cash.
Has to come out of cash. There are certain situations where the debtor's relative or friend wants to charge it on their card that they're going to be repaying. That would be okay. But yeah, so I have a lot of clients for whom it takes a year, sometimes more, to just gather up the fee to file.
Amazing. And yet, meanwhile, like my friend, who I'm actually going to send this video to, meanwhile, he's paying his car payment and he didn't have the money for the bankruptcy. I said, well, that makes no sense at all. Just stop picking the car payment because you don't have the money. But it's a difficult situation. And then I know one part of your practice separate from bankruptcy is debt consolidation or debt settlement. So what does that process look like?
Yeah, so I do debt settlement. I don't do consolidation, and I differentiate the two because there's a lot of consolidation companies that end up being kind of scams, and I don't want people falling for those because a lot of those people end up being my bankruptcy clients after a failed consolidation. So if you're going to be in a program where you're paying monthly payments back, it's almost always a bad idea and going to end in a lot of lawsuits. And
well, hold on right there. I want your people hear that because I say that all the time.
Yeah,
I'm not a professional in that niche. If you're consolidating and making payments, it's probably going to end up in a bankruptcy.
Yeah,
you're just dragging out the time. You're just delaying the inevitable and maybe making it worse, right?
Yeah, because that's designed for people who can't really afford that settlement, and then they don't want to do bankruptcy, but they're putting in these payments. A lot of these consolidation companies take your first 6 months of payments or so, apply toward their fees before even doing any work. And then they're paying little payments here and there. They're just closing little holes, in the leak. But then the roof just comes crashing down. You're faced with collection lawsuits, and then you have no option because it's really difficult for me to go in and try to fix that mess after you've breached settlement agreements with other companies. So then oftentimes bankruptcy is the only option. So when I do that settlement, it's usually for people who maybe went through a rough patch, but now are kind of getting back to normal. And so they don't qualify for Chapter 7 either because their assets are too much or their income is too high to qualify them. So the settlements that I do are lump sum. You pay one payment, you're done with it. That's how you get the best kind of savings, and then creditors don't want to chase you around for payments. That's their incentive to give you a higher discount. They want to be done with it. The downside to that settlement is there are tax consequences on the amount that's forgiven. You're going to get a 1099-C. But for a lot of my debt settlement clients, it doesn't really make a huge difference anymore. Like they went through the rough patch, they got a lot of debt. Now they just want to settle it out and get it over with.
Well, the other thing I advise them is if you're getting money forgiven, just know that like you said, it is income. You need to put aside a percentage of that as taxes of withhold and make sure you have that money to pay taxes, put it in a separate account because you're going to get that tax bill. It's not going to, the IRS is not going to forget about it.
Right.
They're not going to miss it. Like they're really good at there's a lot of things they're not good at, but that's one they're really good at.
Yeah.
I remember I was surprised by years and years ago in something that I thought I settled because I didn't owe the money, and they settled it as though they were forgiving the money, and also have a tax bill for something that I didn't think I owed, but that's a whole different topic.
Yeah.
Well, look, I really appreciate the time. And so I think at what point should somebody consider reaching out to you or your firm to get advice? And what's the best way to do that?
I think if you're reaching a point where it's becoming very difficult for you to meet your minimum monthly payments, it's time to call an attorney and see what your options are, what you qualify for, and whether it's going to make sense for you to just stop making those payments and file.
And so we have your website is kelawfirm.com. And on there, you have a phone number for if someone wants to call, 818-918 9660, and you can actually book appointment right there on the website if you want to get started with them. And it has a whole nice, beautiful picture of you with your hair all done very nicely, and a lot of description about what you do and the areas you practice and such. So again, if you're interested in moving forward with her or helping at least to find out what your options are, give Karine a call, and she and or her staff will help walk you through the process.
And also, just really quickly on the site that you mentioned, because sometimes people are scared to call, right? Or they're worried. I have a vlog on there, and it has a ton of free videos on different questions people might have.
Nice.
So I encourage people to look into that.
Nice. And yeah, so right on the top, VLOG, which is a video log.
Yeah.
And these are various, looks like YouTube shorts you've done different topics. And I guess these are the most common questions you get from customers, and they'll answer right there. If they have questions, you can answer them for them. That's fantastic. Well, I'm going to read some of myself or watch some of myself just because I get asked these kind of questions and want to have a good resource. So, Karine, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate the time being able to share this with my customers, and look forward to working with you going forward.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time.